My name's Jack, a specialist IT recruiter for MCS Group operating across the GB market. Our ultimate goal has always been to become really embedded within the communities that we are operating in, regardless of geography, whether it be south of England, USA, Ireland, or Northern Ireland. We really love to get involved and support the tech communities. I suppose one of the best ways that we do this is by telling the stories of some of the most successful and high potential companies and clients. So today we have Tom Riglar, CEO of Moropo, who's kindly agreed to hop on with me. So first of all, Tom, thanks for joining me. Great to have you on.
Thanks for having me, Jack. Nice to meet you.
Good stuff. So look, just I suppose first off, could you tell me a little bit about yourself and the background of Moropo as well?
Sure. I started my tech career in broadcasting. Actually, I did a broadcast engineering degree, and then worked for a large Canadian company installing TV studios all across the world, which was great. But over time, I got more and more interested in the software side of things. So after doing that for a few years, I actually moved over into web development, worked in a variety of different startups. And from there, hopped over to mobile. React Native was just coming out at the time. Huge technology, and some of the biggest mobile apps in the world are built on it, including Instagram and Facebook. 2019 hit, and I thought it was time to start a digital agency. So me and my co-founder created Moro, which is a React Native specialist agency, still running today in Bristol. And that was where we first came across the problem that we're solving now. So we quickly scaled to around 15 team members, and we'd be working on anywhere between 5 and 10 mobile apps at a time. But what was happening is we were losing 10, 20 hours each week manually testing these apps. So, I always had to say it only takes 3 seconds to send a tweet, but it takes 3 hours to go through and test every feature of Twitter, or should I now say X. So every time the code would change in the apps we were working on, we'd have to go through and we'd run through all of these manual steps to go and test it. And we thought there must be a better way to do this. So we looked at various automated options on the market. How could we work out a way to do this without having to use so much human time? Unfortunately, the user experience for those solutions were really poor. So we thought, let's go and build something ourselves. And we applied for an Innovate UK Smart Grant. We won that. And that funded a team of 14 months with a team of 8 to go and build the solution and bring it to market. And we launched that just a couple of months ago.
Great. Fantastic. Awesome. I suppose just maybe if you want to explain in short then, what would you say are the main sort of USPs of Moropo?
Sure. So there's a couple of USPs of Moropo. One really is around the open source, closed source nature of testing. So with most automated testing solutions, they tend to fall into 2 camps. You've either got fully open source options, in which case they give you a bunch of code and some documentation. You kind of have to go and work it out for yourself. You have to go and build out the infrastructure, connect all of the different parts of the system and make it work. And then you've got closed source commercial options, those are great, and they tend to be kind of fully no code and quite a much smoother user experience. But then you're also locked into the vendor, and you don't really have a way of integrating and getting out of that system. Now with Moropo, we're a halfway house. So we have all of the no code friendly UX suitable tools in the browser to go and build and run tests. But the tests that you go and build with all of those features are open source. So if you want to go and leave Moropo and go and work with another solution, you can go and do that. We're not locking anyone in at any time. The other big thing really is the speed and the consistency. And so we do this by running everything in the cloud. So again, if you look at traditional solutions, usually you'd have the test creation happens locally, and then you go build your tests on your laptop, and then you're like, okay, Tom, we've got our tests. Now it's time to go and scale it up. So we then go and run all of our tests on a cloud system via CI/CD. But what happens is, because there's inconsistency between that local developer environment and the cloud environment, is that you get what we call in the test industry flakiness. So the flakiness occurs because those environments are so different. With Moropo, all of the test creation and all of the test execution occurs in the same controlled cloud environment. So if you go and do something, if you go and tap on a button and then go and input some text in Moropo, then when you're going to rerun that test, whether it's a day later or a month later, it's exactly the same environment that's being run in. And so it's a lot more consistent, and consistency leads to reliability. Reliability leads to confidence, and confidence leads to a happier team who can ship better products.
Great. That's great. In terms of then, obviously, as you might be aware, our audience typically would be technologists and stuff like that. So, in terms of types of technologies that are actually used in Moropo, what would they be, and what would be some of the examples of projects that you guys would be working on?
Sure. So, most of our stack is written in TypeScript. It's actually our UI is actually written in React Native for web. Even though we don't have an iOS or Android version, it's only for web. That's because that's where we came from, running a React Native agency, and so that's what we're confident with. And then we statically serve that in Netlify using Netlify's functions as our main endpoint between the front end and the back end. Again, written in TypeScript. Those Netlify functions are talking to Supabase, which is, if you're not familiar, it's a Postgres tool set. And in that as well, we have our authentication layer and also our real-time communication layer. So if you're getting live updates via Slack or in the dashboard, those are coming via Supabase real-time, which is a WebSocket implementation. That's our platform. We've also got our test farm as well, our device farm. So that's a series of virtual iOS and Android devices, iOS simulators and Android emulators. Those are spun up on demand using a Kubernetes cluster that we're running in AWS. We use AWS open source orchestration layer called Carpenter, which is pretty good at controlling and simplifying some of the Kubernetes settings. And on Android especially, we've got this to a really good point. So if you ask it to spin up 100, it will go and spin up 100 within a few seconds, which is really good.
Awesome.
In terms of our projects, most of our projects that we're working on right now isn't really in the technical side of it because we've delivered the underlying infrastructure, underlying technology. A lot of what we're working on right now is onboarding. So, when we first launched the product, we had very little onboarding. We had like maybe one little message that popped up and say, "Hey, have you tried this? Have you tried that?" But what we realized is because most people aren't familiar with this kind of technology, we need to have a lot more hand holding in that onboarding phase and make sure that people are getting through from initial sign up through to activation. So we're doing a lot of work on that, and also like on things like live demos, so people can go and play around and experience it and get used to it before they commit too much.
Of course. What about in terms of then, I suppose you touched on it a little bit there, but what are the future plans and perhaps some of the challenges that you've already faced or might face along the way to, I suppose, getting to your end goal?
Yeah, I think one of the big challenges we face, Jack, is the traditional skepticism for products like this. Especially with developers and testers, quite rightly tend to be fairly skeptical about some of the new products and new methods and new approaches. And end-to-end testing has existed in some form or another in mobile for a very, very long time. Since mobile apps first came out, really. And so there's a lot of entrenched opinion around that, and the way that we overcome that, the way that we surpass that skepticism is around providing specific use cases and showcasing that we can do particular things. So for example, one of the bits that we're working on right now is Google Play Store integration. So if you're running a subscription business and that subscription is done via Google Play Store, then that's pretty difficult to automate the testing for. That's usually a manual job. You would go in and you would mimic someone starting a new subscription or canceling a subscription, and you would see how your mobile app responds. We've worked out how to automate that. So what we need to do is then show the use cases and show the guides and provide the documentation to make that happen. And so, that's one example in dozens. And so, over the coming year or so, we're going to be working through each of these and making sure that we can show very clearly how you can do this and why it's valuable.
Super. Well, I suppose, look, last thing from me, you've been in this, but I suppose before you've obviously ran Moro, the digital agency, but in terms of perhaps maybe individuals that are interested in starting their own company up, what advice would you give to people like that? I suppose maybe perhaps in the initial phases of carrying that out.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think it depends where you're coming from. So my background is technical. Now I write one line of code a month. My job is to get the product out there and spend as much time with customers as possible. Now, my co-founder is also technical, and he stayed on that technical side. So we both came from that, I guess, build ideology, where you're like, we know how to build this. We can make this cool thing. It's going to work. It's going to be great. But since I've been a full-time entrepreneur since 2019, what I've had to do is think a lot less about what can I build and what should I build. And that really comes for me through two things. One, spending as much time as with your users and your prospective customers as possible. Are they actually interested in this thing? Do they actually want to buy it, or do you just want to build it? And then the second thing really is around distribution. So, you could have the best product in the world, but if no one knows about it, or you have no way of telling people about it, then you have a problem. And that's one of the challenges we're encountering ourselves at the moment. Is especially around developers, because you have to go to where those developers are, and you have to engage them in a place where they hang out. And a lot of people, they don't want to be cold emailed or DM'd on LinkedIn or whatever it might be. So you have to work out a way to talk to them in a way that makes sense for them.
You sound like a recruiter. Awesome. Look, I suppose thanks very much for taking the time today, Tom. It was really good to have you on. Also great to hear, I suppose, the insights into how you guys operate. As always, look, I'm going to tag the company in the post, as well as a link to the website for anyone that wants to check out what you guys do. And look, aside from that, thanks very much for hopping on with me.
Thanks, Jack. Really appreciate it.
Have a good one.